Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Hacking the Human series. I'm Michael Kochnower from itSynergy. This is episode 3 in our series. And today we're going to talk about avoiding email scams. This is going to be a 15-minute webinar, which means we're going to move very quickly. So bear with me as we jump through this. Let's start out talking a little bit about itSynergy for those that aren't familiar with us. Talk about our why, and our why, the reason that we exist, is to create positive experiences with technology. So a number of years ago, we identified that oftentimes the relationship between an IT company and their customers is a negative one because you only call them when things are broken. You're frustrated that things are broken. They're frustrated that you're frustrated, and it creates a negative relationship. So we've tried to refocus that by creating positive experiences with technology. So if you think about that time that you got that new smartphone, or maybe saw a new gadget for the first time, or maybe you were able to get more done faster because of technology, that moment where you kind of have that, wow, this is really cool, that's a positive experience with technology. And we do what we do in order to create that feeling. So let's talk a little bit about why we're here and why we're putting on this 15-minute webinar series called Hacking the Human. So in 2014, IBM did a study that found that 95% of all security incidents involve human error. CompTIA in 2015 followed that up with another study where they found that human error accounts for 52% of the root cause of security breaches. And also in 2015, Experian found that employees and negligence are the leading cause of security incidents, but remain the least reported issue. And so our goal in the next 14 minutes is to give you some quick action items to help you be security smart and not be one of those statistics up above there. And I would encourage you to join us on the second Thursday of every month at 11:30 a.m. Arizona time for a new 15-minute topic, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So today's topic is avoiding email scams. So let's go. Let's get started. Let's start out with what the problem is, what we're trying to address here. A little bit of a definition of the term phishing, which some would consider to be a technical term, but phishing is a form of social engineering in which a message, typically an email, with a malicious attachment or a link is sent to a victim with the intent of tricking the recipient to open that attachment, that attached file, or to click the link in the email. Interestingly, the overwhelming majority of phishing attacks, approximately 89%, according to this Verizon 2016 Data Breach Investigations report, are from organized crime syndicates around the world. And so that's what's causing all of these attacks to be launched. In 2015, last year, the Verizon report found that phishing attacks resulted in a 30% open rate. In other words, approximately 1 out of every 3 people that receives a phishing message actually open the message, and a 12% success rate, meaning that the attacker managed to convince the recipient of the email to either click the attachment or click the link in the email. So approximately 1 out of every 10 messages that they sent resulted in success. The person clicked on the link or did whatever else. And then the last thing, which I find very shocking, is that the median time to have this attack occur is that it took 1 minute and 40 seconds for the recipients to open. So from the moment a bad guy sends a phishing email until the moment that somebody opens it took 1 minute and 40 seconds, and then 3 minutes and 45 seconds to either click the link or open the infected attachment. And then the last thing from a company perspective that you should be worried about is Verizon found that there was only about a 3% reporting rate, i.e. when somebody does click on a link or does click on the attachment, only about 3% of the time do they actually alert the IT department, the security department, management, whoever it is that should be alerted that something happened and that they did click that link or open that attachment. A little bit more on the definition side, let's talk about the difference between pretexting versus phishing. So pretexting is similar to phishing, but a little bit different in that it's the act of creating and using an invented scenario to engage a targeted victim in a manner that increases the chance the victim will divulge information or perform actions that would be unlikely in ordinary circumstances. So what does that mean? Pretexting is a highly targeted attack. So it's a little bit more of a sniper approach versus a shotgun approach. So in this case, the bad guy is targeting you specifically with a very specifically crafted message or set of messages in order to get you to take some sort of action. This is not an attacker similar to a phishing attack where they're sending out millions of emails and just counting on the success percentages to achieve their goals. This a lot of times will involve upfront research, and so oftentimes the bad guys may observe the communication patterns in your company, how you talk to each other, how invoices are approved, how money transfers are approved, that sort of thing, and then they will attempt to mimic those observations. And these attacks can also be very sophisticated. Some examples of some attacks that we've seen recently in the wild is we've actually seen some pretexting attackers that even go so far as to attempt to mimic the signature of a particular individual that might authorize a transaction, a money transfer, an invoice payment, something like that. We've also seen instances where the pretexting attacker will intercept an invoice that is sent from a valid vendor for something you actually did purchase, and will simply update the payment instructions. So they'll change the payment address, or if payment is happening via ACH or wire transfer, they'll just change the account numbers but leave the rest of it unchanged. And so those things are obviously very, very hard to detect. We'll talk a little bit more about how to prevent these things, but pretexting can be a far more sophisticated, far more targeted, and is also very, very common in small businesses because they oftentimes don't have the defenses built to deal with that. So why do people do that? Well, there are two primary objectives in any phishing attack. The first is the bad guy is going to try to install malware. So they're going to try to install some type of software on their PC. So once they've done that, they can do all kinds of things. So if they get the malware installed on your PC, they can start logging your keystrokes. So for example, when you go to bankofamerica.com, and the next thing you type is your username and password, they have a log of that information and can capture that, and then they can go to bankofamerica.com and log on as you. They may use your computer as what's called a beachhead. So your computer, once it gets the malware installed, then gives them a platform to launch attacks against other things in your network, like servers, firewalls, other network elements, that type of thing. They may use that malware to encrypt your data and hold it for ransom. That's known as ransomware. We'll have a future Hacking the Human webinar series on ransomware. They can watch what you're doing through your webcam, so they can actually watch live video of what you're doing in front of your computer. And then they can do things like they can read your emails, they can send email as you, so they can look up your contacts and send email to your contacts that looks like and in fact did come from you. And they can also intercept emails coming into you. The second objective that they're going to try to do with a phishing attack is convince you to give up your credentials, to give up your username and password to something. So this is most commonly done by tempting you to go to a fake website, and depending on the sophistication of the attack, sometimes those fake websites can be an exact duplicate of the real website. So if you take a bank website or some kind of a financial website, they will use the logos from that bank. They will make the website look exactly like the legitimate website. And obviously, banking and other financial sites are common targets. And one of the other things that they do is they will often use similar domain names that are hard to spot. This is known in the tech industry as typo squatting. I've got a couple of examples here. You can see that first URL, www.google.com. That's not Google, which is google.com. But it looks very closely, and if you're in the middle of a fast-paced day and you have emails coming in and the phone's ringing and people are talking to you, you may not notice that. Another thing that they'll do often is they'll sometimes use websites that refer to celebrity names that are unaffiliated with the celebrity. I've got a couple of examples here. So evalongoria.com for many years was not associated with evalongoria.com. The bottom one, www.falwell.com, which you might think is associated with Jerry Falwell. Well, Jerry Falwell only spells his name with one L. And so Falwell with two L's.com is actually somebody who doesn't like Jerry Falwell and has put up a website putting up arguments against what Jerry Falwell says. And then the middle one there, whitehouse.com, has for a very long time been a very well-known pornography site. So you might think you're going to get information about the president, and you're going to be quite surprised with what you see there. So you say, I'm in. What do I do? How can I protect myself from these attacks? Well, let's start out with the easy stuff. Number one, you don't have an uncle in Nigeria who has $52 million to send you, and Britney Spears is not naked or doing anything shocking in that picture that you've just received in your email. So I'm sure we have all seen an email like this at some point. By the way, all of the examples that I'm showing today are real emails that I have received at one time or another. You can see here, this is my long-lost friend in Nigeria that wants to immediately transfer me $52 million. So I think at this point, we're all pretty aware of this type of attack, and this type of thing isn't very successful anymore. The next thing is, as they get a little bit better, you are not important enough for Bill Gates, James Comey, who happens to be the director of the FBI, or any other VIP to email you personally. So when you get a message like this one that says it's coming from James Comey, the executive director of the FBI in Washington, D.C., that obviously is not a legitimate message. There are a number of things that are very obvious that we can pick out from this message that would tell us it's not legitimate. So James Comey is not going to email me from an address that ends in mail.org. James Comey is also most likely not going to have typos in the subject line. So instead of funds due to overpayment, it's funds duet to overpayment. Unlikely that that's legitimate. The thing that's funny to me about this particular message is if we scroll down in this message a little bit, the bad guys have actually even inserted a paragraph here warning me about the dangers of phishing. And you can see here they say, we therefore warn our dear citizens and foreigners to be very careful with any claim email you receive. So I thought that was kind of humorous. And then finally, the last thing that makes this a very obvious phishing scam is the fact that they want me to email all of my information to this address, info.247@accountant.com. Again, very unlikely that that is going to be legitimate. So let's get even better. What happens when the email address appears valid? So let me show you a sample here. cPanel, for those of you that don't know, is a very common web hosting platform where a lot of people host their websites. So in this case, I've received a message from cPanel, and you can see that the from address is in fact support@cpanel.net, and you can see that there's some kind of a security problem here, and they would like me to log in and put in my username and password, and you can see that the link that they're asking me to click on here is in fact cpanel.net/login. So all of that, just by visual inspection, looks valid. But there are a couple of things. So we've got the cpanel.net address, there is the valid URL, but when I hover my mouse over that URL, you can see that the link that it's actually going to take me to is allcaremedicalsupplyinc.com/images/www.cpanel.net/www.cpanel.net. And so in this case, unless I actually hovered over that link and paid attention to where I was going before I clicked on it, everything else about this message looks legitimate. And so that's one of the things that you can do in order to avoid clicking on a link that you shouldn't click on. So how do the techies tell? Like, how do I know when a message is invalid? Well, it's pretty complicated. I'll show you the process. So in Outlook, if you go to File and Properties on any message, you're going to get a screen similar to this. It may look a little bit different depending on the version of Outlook. But you can see down at the bottom right there's a whole bunch of text in the box called Internet Headers. So if I take that text and blow it up into a full screen, it looks like all this mumbo jumbo. You can see this would be virtually impossible for the average computer user to read. But as a techie, I can look at this, and there are a couple of key things that I see, which I'll zoom in on here. So first of all, and by the way, this is from a message that was legitimately sent to me from somebody at CCS Projects. So you can see that here I've blown up that the message is received from outbound.protection.outlook.com, and if I blow up this line down here, it says CCS Southwest, which is the person who was sending it to me, designates that IP address as a permitted sender. So for me as a techie, I can look at this and I can tell, because these two numbers match, the 157, 56, et cetera, that this is in fact a legitimate message. But even for somebody who is technically savvy to actually go through and dig through all of this information and look at that on every single email you receive would be almost impossible. So as the average person, as a non-techie person, what can you do? Well, by far the number one strategy you can use to protect yourself against email scams is pick up the telephone and manually verify the email that you've received, that it is in fact valid. If you've gotten a message from the president of the company, from whoever else, just pick up the telephone. That's the number one thing that you can do to stop this stuff. So what else can you do? Well, don't click on links in emails. Instead, go to the website yourself manually. So for example, if you get an email from your bank, let's say Chase, and it says something about your account, there's a security problem, there's a problem with your balance, whatever, just open a browser and go to www.chase.com and log in normally. If the bank wants to tell you anything, you will be able to see that by going through that process if it is in fact a legitimate email. Now, if you have a high degree of confidence that an attachment or link in an email is legitimate and you really need that info, then scan the file using antivirus software before opening it up. There's also a site that I have here, and by the way, I'm going to have a couple of links in the presentation, and if you need any of those, my email address will be at the end. You can email me. I'd be happy to send them to you. But if you go to www.virustotal.com, that will actually allow you to either enter a link or a file, and it will scan it for viruses before you open it. So what can the IT department do? So this is something you may want to talk with your IT department about. There is a technology out there called DMARC, and it stands for this big, long, domain-based message authentication, reporting, conformance, blah, blah, blah. It tells the world how you send email and tells everyone what to do if things aren't right. So if somebody receives an email that says it comes from you, but it's not actually from you, DMARC gives instructions to the recipient about what to do. So there are two parts to DMARC. You have to configure DMARC for yourself. So for your domain, yourcompany.com, you need to configure DMARC. And then the receiving organization needs to pay attention to what you tell them. But what you can see here is that all of the big guys, AOL, Comcast, Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, Facebook, etc., all recognize and use DMARC. So they're doing their part. You just need to do your part. And you can go to this website here and enter your domain, so yourcompany.com, and it will tell you if DMARC is set up for your domain or not. If it's not, I recommend that you do that. And if it is, good for you. And of course, if you are a customer of ours watching this and it's not set up, by all means let us know, submit a ticket, and we will get that set up for you. So what is safe to open in terms of attachments? The answer is nothing. Microsoft Office files have embedded macros that can allow attackers to have their way with your computer. PDF files are equally vulnerable. Interestingly enough, Adobe is the platform with the fastest exploit time of all vendors. So when an exploit is discovered or announced in an Adobe product, that exploit is picked up and released, and bad guys take advantage of it faster than any other vendor out there. Zip files can be self-extracting, meaning when you open it, it will automatically run a program. And zip files are also commonly used by bad guys to try to avoid antivirus programs, so those are definitely not safe. And then there are a lot of executable file types. So a lot of people know, well, don't open an exe file. That's well known at this point, but there are lots of other types of files too, some of them which you are probably not familiar with, like the .ps1 that I have here. So it's just best not to open anything at all rather than to try to figure out what's safe. And then the last thing is use your spidey sense, what I call your spidey sense. So when you get an email, if your gut tells you something's not right, you've got to listen to that. So are you expecting that email? Does the attachment that's attached make sense? Would it make sense that this attachment is coming with this email? Is there money movement involved in any way, i.e. authorizing an invoice payment, authorizing a wire transfer, any of those sorts of things? And if there is, consider an alternative for verification. Pick up the telephone like we talked about earlier. Keep your guard up if it doesn't feel right. So if your spidey sense is tingling, use these the sites that I gave earlier, like virustotal.com. Scan it with your antivirus software. Check with the person who sent it. Pick up the phone or talk with the IT department. And finally, don't be embarrassed to sound the alarm. So if something seems fishy to you, don't be embarrassed to pick up the phone or to talk to somebody and say, hey, is this email legitimate? Did you really send this to me? And just verify that everything is okay. So thank you very much. It's been a very quick, I went a little bit over, so I apologize for that. It's been a little bit longer than 15 minutes, but our next webinar is October 13 at 11:30 a.m. Arizona time. Registration is now live. You can go to itsynergy.com/webinar to register for next month's webinar. The topic is going to be working remotely and keeping yourself safe while you do that. Our webinars are the second Thursday of every month at 11:30 in the morning. There is a picture of me. There is my email address. By all means, feel free to email me if you'd like any links from today's presentation. And if you know of anyone else that you think should be watching these webinars, then please email info@itsynergy.com and we will make sure to get them on the list. So thanks very much and have a great day.